Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiardjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon as we continue to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings, especially in the age of AI. In case you're wondering who we are, profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, so head over there. And just a reminder that views expressed here are personal and not of any specific company or organization. Keep that in mind, and let's make this session interactive by using the Zoom chat. So I look forward to that. And if you want anything that's on this slide deck, it's also available right there on the homepage of mondaylive.org. So this being February of 26, following the AHR Expo in Vegas, we're going to spend the rest of the month sort of considering what happened in Las Vegas in the rearview mirror and sort of seeing what the future lies ahead from that perspective. So we're going to continue doing that. And our agenda for today, our normal news and trends chit chat, and then on the rearview mirror side of things, we really want to start to think about the broader impact of everything that we saw in Vegas and all of the impact of AI and everything to the industry. So that's kind of the framing of the conversation we're hoping to have today. So looking forward to that. But before that, as always, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair for news from automated buildings.
Great, thanks, Anto. A lot of activity on the site as a result of Vegas and just everything that's going on. We came over 1 week, there were 11,000 impressions. That's the highest we've been, and you can kind of see the graph there is rapidly increasing. So that's good. That Las Vegas River Mirror clicks to one of Kimon's summaries, and it's a good one, just talking about the whole idea of where AI is taking us and the amplification of that. The one below that is Kelly's capture of last week's meeting, AHR debrief and the AI acceleration. If everybody remembers, the AI acceleration kind of engulfed the AHR debrief, and I think it would be good to be able to get back at the AHR debrief because that's important as well. But the AI acceleration is certainly a message that we're all going to have to deal with. Kimon has got this on our site, the software platform wars. I think this is going to be like a historical document that is when change occurred, and there's a whole bunch of people there. That it was kind of interesting when you went to the session. It sounded like nobody knew that this was happening, but they actually did. And it's amazing how many people have already embedded Linux into their products and they're planning for it. So I think they heard the footsteps coming, but this was kind of a meeting of the minds. I think Kimon did an amazing job of kind of tying it all together as just one of the guest speakers. Had a really powerful position there. He's also put the C4SV story there, and he's next to that. He just posted just late last night. I just got it on early this morning. A coalition and over in the corner, the right-hand corner, bottom, coalition in motion, building the bridges, and this is the greatest summary. I was at the lawn booth several times, and it was always interesting, but at no point was all those people ever there at the same time. So you never really got to see the pictures. So actually, this presentation, in my mind, is better than being at the lawn booth because it was sort of being assembled there, but you can actually see the finished product. And it's a powerful message showing all of the pieces. Kudos to you, Kimon. It's a great, the amount of effort that you put into that and the amount of editing you must have done. And you basically, we're still waiting to get all of our sessions. We had over 2,000 people that came to our sessions, so that was a big number for us. and we're we should have ours up later this week. So you definitely scooped us by taking your own video and good stuff. Down in the corner, there's the one with Jim, the BACnet story, which I think is a good one. We had a great time in Vegas pulling together all of our folks and the sessions and yeah, just a lot of things going on. The picture of Carrie and I in the back of a robotaxi. I kind of want your mind to kind of just play with that for a bit. This thing was so comfortable and such a great place to have a meeting as you're both facing each other. Uh, it it raises the question, do we need buildings? Or do we in fact, when we want to have a meeting, a very confidential meeting, or we just call a robocab and it goes around and picks us all up and we all ride around the robocab, finish our meeting, and it delivers us back to where we believe home. We need the building. Are we at a point that the building can come to us? Anyway, just a thought, just a thought. Other than that, oh, I know the other one was actually Steve was a big part of the T1L breakthrough, and he did an interview with Kelly, which we're trying to get online up in there. And yeah, that was a lot of the talk at Vegas was just how significant this was to take a lot of those old twisted pair networks, the RS-485 networks, and turn them into Ethernet. And so that's a big power play, and people are creating new devices to hang on the existing networks, which is going to make the whole retrofit and bring more information to us at a greater speed. So I think that's important. I think
Cool.
that's about it. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you. So this thing about meeting in a cab, just how ordering an Uber basically to have your meeting.
Yes.
That's just gonna then create traffic jams then. Anyway,
Well,
let's
it might be just happening on a campus. Imagine a campus that's not a campus of buildings, but is a parking lot of robocabs that you call. Anyway, the options in the future are amazing.
oh, it's great. It's great to be
It's,
thinking that way.
it's a whole new meaning to remote workforce, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Rick, what's going on? Did you want this slide as well as the next one?
I wanted that one deleted. I thought I did delete it.
Or you didn't? Okay, next one.
I tried to add a slide to the deck that was a screen cap of the new front page of C4SB website, which is a link. It features that same bridge that Kimon that was just on the previous slide. So at the top of the C4SB website is the link to that same that same link that you saw with the bridge. So we're and you know we're excited about the different conversations that are happening about C4SB that were happening as individual conversations or happening as group networking or happening as kind of ad hoc conversations. It was this year was not the time for us to be able to deliver a track of C4SB discussions or a unified message. We were lucky and happy to have this space at the Landmark booth where the individuals could tell their own story and or have some amount of networking happen. And I think that the result of all of that was very, very positive and brought a lot of attention for people who wanted to learn more. And we've been using this slide that you see on the screen right now as a way to describe what has happened with C4SB over the past 4 years. We started with a small number of working groups. We've grown rapidly as we've started to be associated with the Linux Foundation. And now as we go into 2026, we have some new working groups. And then I wanted to add a quick little, there will be about 4 or 5 more working groups that'll be happening really soon, in addition to the the ones that just came to light last year, and that pace of getting attention and then getting focus on specific work or collaborations with other organizations um, is really exciting. And I'm working on a explainer that tells a little bit more of the story of each of the working groups and also has a space to be able to talk about some of the areas of interest that people have expressed. And hopefully by next week, we'll have that ready to be able to be reviewed. But the areas of interest that are being explored is things like the 231 sequences and how audiovisual plays into buildings and GIS to RDF. What am I missing? Oh, the whole physical layer of UDMI and Matter and protocols like that. So we're going to be adding more working groups, more areas of focus and interest from folks that want to be involved in different technical projects. But again, if you've got any interest in specific ones, you reach out to me. If you've got interest in membership, it's Melanie at c4sb.org. I'm Rick at c4sb.org. And again, next week we'll have a little more details on some of the a little bit more detail on what each one is and more details on what the meeting schedule is, hopefully for each, and how to be more involved.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Anything else anybody want to bring up? Hearing none, we shall proceed to talk about, again, the Las Vegas in the rear view. We spent, as Ken said, we spent probably way too much time last week talking about AI. But I think we sort of touched on some things that really need to be brought back and clarified, maybe, and maybe that's going to help us. So I did put together a couple of slides before we go back to AHR. And I think the biggest thing that sort of is sort of puzzling about AI and the stuff that I presented last week is sort of the economics. How is this going to work? And how can some of those things be true when they feel really sort of wrong or crazy? And so what I'm going to do here is what I did is I looked at the revenue of Anthropic. And one of the reasons why I picked Anthropic is that they are they're a total AI company. All their revenue is all about AI, unlike Google and Microsoft and other companies that obviously have other things, right? So looking at that, and this is basically their progression. In 24, they did $1 billion of revenue. Not bad for a startup. But the next year, which is just finished, they went up to 10 billion. It's actually slightly over 10 billion, but amongst friends, let's call it 10 billion. So I was listening to Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, sort of talking about this and talking about the fact that what they have to project is this year that they're going to do $100 billion. Right? But is that realistic? Is really what you can actually see in his head. He's trying to figure out. And the reason for that is that for him to do $100 billion in 26, they have to have the data center capacity to do $10 billion. And that is the only gating criteria, because the market demand is obviously there, because he's seeing the revenue grow up as you've seen the last couple of years. Right, so he's not questioning that there is there's $100 billion revenue potential, but what he's really questioning is does that sound reasonable? And part of that is that if that's reasonable, then the next year is going to be $1 trillion of revenue, right? Which starts to sound really crazy, because the biggest company in the world today is Amazon, only does 700 billion, and they've been going for decades. Right, so this is kind of the The strange thing about all of this is exponential growth, but what we're starting to see is that exponential growth can't really happen in reality because reality says different things, right? So this is kind of one way of looking at that. The other thing that's sort of gating all of this, the sort of controlling all of this, is the main input for this revenue is actually not data, it's actually energy. Energy is what Anthropic needs, power is what it needs to create a data center. So let's look at that. What is the total compute that's being used today? Today's AI is using somewhere between 10 and 15 gigawatts. Based on current build, things that build projects, this is going to go up to about 30 to 40 gigawatts. And based on planning, they think it's going to be somewhere in 100 gigawatts in 28, 2 years from now. Which then says that if they continue that, you get to 300 gigawatts by 29. Right, and again, just as a reality check, we consume in the US 1,300, just over 1,300 gigawatts today. Right, so this is a quarter of the consumption of energy for the US, just for AI. So that's kind of the limiting factor, which is one of the reasons why people are sort of saying that there is not enough power in the world to get to this number here, to get to $1 trillion revenue or multiple $1 trillion revenues. That's why they're starting to think about putting AI data centers in space, because you get completely different economics up there. But there's some sort of interesting rules of thumb that I think will be good for us to know in all of this, because it looks complicated and the numbers are huge, but I actually think the math is actually extremely simple, very, very simple. Because these AI data centers, they only do one thing. It's not like a big complicated factory or whatever, and big complicated data center that can handle lots of different workloads. These data centers deal with one workload only, or actually two. One is the pre-training, right, which is their sort of research part of the expenditure. That typically consumes about half of their compute, and the other half is producing tokens. That's the only thing they produce, one token after another. So how does this all work? How do the numbers work? So first of all, the sort of the simple numbers of what does it take to build a gigawatt compute, and this is roughly the industry rule of thumb, somewhere between 35 to $50 billion. It's going to take 3 to 5 years to build for each gigawatt. So you decide how many gigawatts you want, you just multiply by that number. It's really that simple. So that's the capex side of things. What is the opex side? The opex side of it is, again, very simple. Each gigawatt costs somewhere between 10 and $15 billion to run a year. And the other part of it that's sort of interesting in terms of how it produces the production is that each gigawatt then creates 1 billion tokens a second, which is roughly 31 quadrillion tokens a year, a lot. That's basically what we're consuming. And an average person, enterprise person, probably today consume about 300,000 tokens a day. And agents will consume a lot more than that. So an agent would probably be 10 times that. It's kind of new territory, obviously. But one of the reasons for that is they run 24/7, whereas humans don't. And the other aspect is that a human is quite likely to have multiple agents. So you do the calculations, and that number in terms of the tokens per user goes up dramatically once you start to implement multiple agents. And there's another piece of information there about the retail value. That's what they basically sell. At the end of the day, what Anthropic sells is tokens, and they price it per million. When you're doing APIs to them, that's how they price it. This number is actually going down over time as the compute is actually getting better, so it can produce more token per unit of work. So this is basically the economics of what's going on in AI. And I want to just show one other slide, which is kind of a bit silly. It's kind of the thing I talked about last week, the Malt book. It's now got nearly 3 million agents online. There was nearly 2 million last year, so another 1 million a week is basically what they're doing, new agents. And the other thing that's sort of come up is this thing, a Malt court, which is where agents go and complain about bad behaviors of other agents. Bit crazy, but what you're starting to see is an ecosystem of agents, and I don't know whether this is ultimately the right way or not, but anyway, that's what's going on. But it's really sort of down to the sort of the economics, which is I'm going to stop and just see if people have thoughts on this. Any thoughts of this?
That scale is pretty amazing. Did you go back to crossover when the bottom falls out of all of this, when we can't keep up with one or more of these scaling factors?
What was the question, sorry?
Did you go back and kind of cross where the bottom falls out of this? At what point can we not keep up with it currently?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure anybody knows. The question that people are asking is, where is the limit? What is the capacity of the market to consume tokens? How many $1 trillion worth of revenue could there be by selling nothing but tokens? And obviously the economy is not infinite. You can't have an infinite economy, so there has to be a ceiling at some point.
Right.
Right. So nobody knows where that is. But what people are starting to say is that the sort of the simple thinking of exponential growth just cannot happen, and we've all known that. Because in physical reality, you just can't do that. So it's going to plateau at some point, and presumably that the level at which it plateaus is going to be, and I don't know how many years in the future, going to be the sort of the way that we as humanity consumes AI, and it's not going to, from that point on, it's obviously not going to multiply by 10 every year. So it will have some sort of equivalent level sort of normality. But what that is, I don't know. It's certainly not. It's not 10x.
Yeah, it's an interesting. This is basically a 10x thing that you were describing last week. So if this is really going to happen, then something has to fall apart, right? I added a slide right after yours, Anto. It's kind of interesting. I saw this morning from. There's an interesting quote on the next slide. Oops. Oh, you have a different set of slides, maybe. It's not the live one, huh?
It is. It's the only one. Oh, that one. This one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, read that quote there. This is from an article that was just placed on Psychology Today from Cornelia Walter. So the feedback loop is almost elegantly brutal. We build AI in theory to solve problems caused by industrial complexity, which requires industrial energy to run, deepening the ecological crisis, which generates more urgent problems, which require more AI. So it's kind of a death spiral she's describing. Are we feeding into that? And I think part of it has to do with, first of all, the more sloppy we get about using AI to extract knowledge and value out of systems that are inherently sloppy about how they store it, then it creates more energy demand too. I'm not saying that's going to be the whole answer, but I'm somehow feeling the middle there. We're kind of just drunk on the power of all this, and it's just going to keep on feeding back onto this spiraling effect. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's somewhere in the discussions we've been having. But tough one.
They're high on their own supply, I think is which is funny because I just got it. Well, I won't go into that, but the question of whether there is a somebody just did Tracy or Kimon just say something about hitting a wall or where it runs out. It's like,
Yeah,
does
that
it?
was me.
What phrase did you use? I'm sorry.
When does the bottom fall out?
Fall out. Um, the so the question I think economists are asking is, yeah, the economies aren't unlimited, but this is just an acceleration of what's happened in the past when there's been innovation that has been injected into an economy. It's just happening faster than where we've accommodated new efficiency gains, but usually the economies of civilized countries like ours sort of absorb that efficiency over a longer period of time. But the gross domestic product, goes up, or the GDP per capita goes up dramatically. So it's not a zero sum game. It doesn't have to be thought of as a bottom falling out because new values are created versus like a zero sum game where the value is taken from one, Peter to pay Paul. But usually uh, a com absorbing these efficiencies and seeing the result in economic terms happens a little bit slower. But holy cow, nobody's got any time to even stop and think about that or ask some smart people about how does this happen when it's just all sped up because it's happening so fast. If you look at the headlines, Anthropic is now being their largest customer is threatening to walk. Actually, just put them on hold. Um,
Yeah, that was one of the sort of interesting things I was listening to their CEO,
yeah.
right? And you sort of imagine him later this year, right? When maybe let's say that he can see 100 billion in his revenue for this year, right? Does he then build out using these numbers to 1 trillion at that point? Does he build out to 1 trillion of revenue? Which you can use these numbers, but it's going to cost him like hundreds of billions of dollars to do that. And that's a question. This kind of a supply. Do you have enough supply in your business to be able to sell it? And that is an existential question for him, because if he's short, right, he can go bankrupt very, very easily because of this sort of how much these things cost to run. In other words, if you overbuild your capacity, you're dead. And if you're underbuild capacity, you're dead because your competitors would have built it the proper rate. So, I mean, to me, this sort of economics is not our problem. And I think the way to really sort of think about this is that this is what the AI industry is doing. And what we should be focused on is how we are using the AI, right, to do whatever it is that we're doing. And we don't need to expect tenfold increase annually. We don't need to do that. If we did 50% increase, it would be great, or whatever, any number less than 10x. But I think that's the sort of the issue is that there's AI and then there's expertise, and I'm hearing a lot of people sort of focus on this. The AI. So if you have a business that is using AI to do something that is basically your expertise, the value of the AI component is going down to zero. There is nothing special about the AI part of it. The expertise that you have will not go down to zero. In fact, it will go up significantly, especially if you leverage the fact that the AI costs are going down. So I think that's kind of the way I think we as an industry that is not the AI industry need to think about this. How do we think about the use of this so that we can increase our level of business, increase the value that we deliver by using this sort of craziness that's going on in the cost of AI or the cost of intelligence.
I
Yes.
agree with that, Anto, but what I will say is that AI is going to have an effect on our business, whether it's actually how we do our business or the end effect. One of the interesting things that David Wiltz pointed out this week is that the stocks of the property management and real estate investment trusts crashed to the tune of hundreds of billions last week. And I think that's multifold. One is how AI is going to affect the businesses that they have, whether it's brokerage, whether it is facility maintenance. And the other is just fundamentally, if we replace a lot of office workers, white collar workers with AI, do we really need as many offices? And I think the stock market has rendered an opinion on that, and the answer is no. So I think that those are going to have zeroth and first order effects on our business in terms of our customers and what we do, which are over and above how AI affects our current delivery mechanisms.
Yeah, in the same way, AI itself is going to impact the whole world, and the way
Right.
we live is going to impact the need for real estate, especially commercial real estate.
Right. So if we're meeting in Ken's self-driving vehicle, we don't need as many offices. And just today, I happened to be driving around the suburbs, very unusually for me, just looking at all those insurance company buildings that don't really need to be there.
Because AI agents don't need desks.
Right.
Or
Well, I guess
taxes.
that was a conversation stopper. Sorry about that.
Less
Well,
desks, less
Yeah.
I mean,
buildings.
that is part of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Less desks, less buildings. Actually, the connectivity and the domain expertise, like you mentioned, Anto too, I think that's the sweet spot, right? I mean, the automation, if it's going to go down to zero, AI is going to be churning all through this stuff. But it's really the understanding between the systems, so you don't have to infer the relationship or extract it from inefficient sources, PDFs, documents, scattered data. And if we have these graphs that are going to start talking to each other, you have a direct point to go to, so you don't have to waste a lot of energy doing that. But you have to have somebody to know that's wiring that connection, which I think is exactly what was a lot of the discussions at AHR were about. Exactly that.
Yeah, I think the word is precision.
Mm-hmm.
As an engineering field, to do what we do, we think of things from a precision perspective. We need to be precise, or at least somewhat precise, in the things that we do.
Right.
And AI, and a lot of AI, and a lot of how we're using AI in the sort of human sense is actually counter to that.
Yeah.
Is non-deterministic, and it's sort of in a lot of ways it's kind of okay, because we humans are also non-deterministic, so it's kind of behaves just like us. But when we come to engineering, it has to be 23.7, right? It cannot be approximately that. It is whatever that thing is.
Right. Right.
And that to me is the use of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The thing is, AI is going to affect our domain of buildings. One of the things I keep trying to find this statistic, because we keep talking about office buildings as if they're the most important thing, or the largest sector of the built environment, and they're not. Um, the In the US, office buildings make up about 12 billion square feet, right? And the total is 90 billion. So what is that, 14 or 15%? So if it's, say the office space, which is already empty, isn't needed, and those buildings fall down and don't get replaced, all the other categories of commercial buildings, which are education, food sales, healthcare, inpatient, outpatient, retail, public assembly, all the other categories are still thriving because humans do like to gather. They don't like to gather around water coolers as much as what it seemed like for a while they did, but they do like to get together to do stuff. And so whether that's watching sporting events or going to church or going shopping, they like to go do those things. We just happen to have a whole bunch of buildings that were built because of how companies wanted people to have to stand around a water cooler and gossip. And that was probably, those buildings probably should have been built even to be even more temporary because they weren't, as the economy changed, they became unnecessary. But that doesn't mean that humans are not going to want places to do things together. And that's again where the economics of increased efficiency are not a zero-sum game. We move our attention to the things we want to do versus the things we have to do. I mean, it's not like a preacher, but I mean, I don't believe that this technology is going to put us all out of work or out of a desire to have um, lives and livelihoods and contribute and add value to a community. I think in a big picture way, we just have to like anticipate how that's going to be different and navigate our companies and our products to that spot. But I don't mind the fact that all these crappy buildings in downtown urban centers are going to be empty. That it doesn't hurt my feelings at all.
In my presentation I did in the booth at AHR about small buildings, 71% of the 6 million buildings in the US are less than 10,000 square feet.
71%?
71%.
Wow.
50% are less than 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And they work really well. And when they stop working well, it's so funny because they abandon them. They turn into dentist offices or something, or thrift stores. But the small buildings are easy to repurpose, and they pay back really quickly. And so when there's a decision made to make one of these small buildings, the math is that it's going to pay back in 2.5 or 3 years. A Top Golf facility pays back in like 9 months. These Andretti indoor racing things, 2 years. So there's an awful lot of building that'll happen that'll be because of the population's new freedom, and they don't have to be spending all the time in traffic jams trying to get to that stupid office that they hated. So
And also the fact that many jobs will actually go away. I mean, that's what Jim was sort of referring to in the sort of empty insurance buildings, because that's a
that
classic
that
example of an industry that's going to be taken over by AI.
But to be clear, the need for the human doesn't go away. The need for the job
Yes,
description goes away. The need for
but the economics all change.
and potentially get better
Yes.
because the
So
cost of intelligence went way down.
yeah. So instead of having 20 insurance adjusters, you could have one with 100 agents doing the equivalent work.
And I'm not trying to be the rose-colored glasses guy either. It's like there's difficulty, but there's never been more ease in retraining workforce than there is now. So the flexibility and the portability and the fact you don't have to pay $30,000 to relocate a worker just to get them to start, there's a whole bunch of efficiencies that happen in this new, digital economy as well. And it's not hurting the competitiveness of the countries that are embracing it and home to the innovation. And that's what's exciting is like, so figure out how to use the AI. Um, and I was talking with some lobbyist friends in DC. Our industry is actually fairly software free. By free, I mean we don't have any. We don't have enterprise software that's running our buildings. We have premises-based software that's running our buildings for the most part. We're not slaves to, enterprise software, and so therefore our domain didn't get hit as hard when all the SaaS software valuations went to zero or whatever, because our industry is not dominated by SaaS players. Which as we grow, we have a whole lot of greenfield opportunity to leverage AI and agentic AI in places where there has not been a solution before. And that's economic growth opportunity for our industry, not economic destruction. And
I'm just going to put this up mostly for Steve, because I don't think you saw this, Steve. but we can continue conversation.
Wow. Well, spinning it back to AHR is that as we walked around AHR and with some of the people that I was walking around with at AHR was describing here's 60,000 people wandering around in a facility that was mostly free of software. Everybody, there were people talking about how AI may someday impact what they are doing for a living, but for the most part, I don't know how many millions of square feet or million and a half square feet or whatever at the convention center, but almost totally void of software. A lot of upside opportunity.
Yeah, especially if the cost of developing goes down so much. If it goes down to almost free to develop apps, that means anybody can jump in, right? Any of the smaller players, bigger players. And that's what I think that's the positive side of this. If we say there's an opportunity there to shift it, and you don't have to rely on what, ERPs and whatever, you can actually build it yourself, and the cost is getting down to the point where you can almost automatically create on the fly. At the same time, I think that we heard at AHR a lot too, is a lot of the standard, like we talked at the BACnet session too, right? The tempo of change and the expectation of using standards, accessing standards, waiting for standards. And I keep hearing, multi-year roadmaps even to this day about development of BIM and whatever. It's almost like a non-starter when you hear that and say, well, 2 years from now, we'll have something ready. Well, you won't even be around if you wait for that long.
The thing that's kind of interesting to me is this isn't a question of it is just AI, but there are multiple prongs here of impact. I don't know how to describe this. So you got the technology that makes things faster, easier, cheaper, potentially eliminating jobs, eliminating the need for people in office buildings and so forth. But then you've got the economic impact, the negative economic impact of empty buildings and what that's going to do to our industry, right? There are a lot of integrators out there and product manufacturers and so forth that are going to be impacted because the volumes of their business, the opportunities are going to change, I think.
But I think Rick's comment basically responds to that, because I think that will change how we live as a society into things like fun things like Topgolf and things. Because we still exist, we humans still exist, and we still have to do things. It's just that we won't have to do things in the way we've been doing it in the past.
Yeah, it does sound like, the bigger buildings obviously were the domain of the controls sales, and most of our careers have been kind of with our head buried in selling controls to big complicated buildings. And those smaller buildings, even that Andretti building, or however large it is, an indoor go-kart track, it's really fascinating. Huge, $50 million building. It's simpler HVAC with simpler controls. But see, none of us right now work for those big controls companies. Some of us are distributors, and some of us are, we're selling systems on top of it. But we're also at the same time we're trying to invent products and services for those simpler buildings, and we're trying to take our domain expertise and apply it to the simpler systems. And that's where I feel like there's a change of focus, because we're no longer making the big buildings, but we're making a lot of small buildings.
Kimon mentioned earlier that the cost of doing things is collapsing, to use that word. And so in that light, really the question is, what are you, if you're trying to do something, you're trying to build a product or something, right? And you recognize that the cost of AI is just collapsed. So there's no value there. You can't really resell that because it's zero. You can multiply, it just doesn't work. The thing that AI won't collapse is whatever expertise that you have, right? because if you don't have any, you don't have any value. Your value in the future is purely is related to an expertise in a specific domain to do something. It's not going to be an expertise necessarily in AI itself. It's how you do that expertise, whatever it is, maximizing, leveraging AI as much as possible. That's really the sort of the combination that would seem to be what the future holds. And that goes, I think that goes for individuals and it goes for companies. So what does this do to our industry here?
I mean, if nothing else has come out of this conversation, it should be a huge wake-up call that we need, whatever our position or job, our company's business is, we need to be learning and understanding and out in front of all of this change that's about to hit at a pace that I don't think any of us were ready or had thought about. I was trying to think earlier in the conversation, is there something else in the history of mankind that ever hit like this? That, you know, the closest thing I could think of was electricity, maybe. But that happened so slowly over time and required such infrastructure build out and so forth. This, you know, other than what you put up about compute power, doesn't require anything new.
Actually,
And it's going to teach us how to do it better along the way, by the way.
but I think we're in an incredible position because AI does all this thinking that's never been done before. But in the final analysis, we're the industry that does the actuation. And that is going to be, the pressure is going to be on us to actuate the commands of AI. And our businesses, I think, are just going to grow beyond belief. They're going to follow to that point that we will not be able to achieve. Like nobody in the AI industry wants to go out there and actually figure out how to make that valve move in an old system. And we have that cardinal knowledge. And again, I keep going back. It's not all that much different than when we moved to DDC. You know, we basically still use pneumatics to move the dampers and valves, and we use our old technologies, and we will probably not replace those technologies because they do in fact work. And the people who have knowledge of how to do that, and to basically the only thing that is changing is probably the line at which we used to supply the controls. Now that's probably going to be all done by AI. But ultimately, AI is going to give us a command, open the valve, open the damper, close the door. The physical stuff, we're the physical side of AI. And I think we're just in a great position. I can't imagine anywhere we'll be overwhelmed. And we're in a time when we're struggling. In one of our sessions, Scott Cochran asked us, he said, is there anybody in this room, a room of 200 or 300 people, and that needs more work? And not one hand went up. Can you believe that? That's now. I mean, you can imagine what that's going to be like by Chicago. I think as an industry, we're not going to be able to cope with keeping up.
Maybe that's worth pondering on, because I would argue that those people, if they're presented with better tools, right, would be able to do more, maybe even to the point where they can take in more jobs or take in more work, because their way of thinking, their current way of thinking right now, that I can't take anymore, is not based on these economics. It's based on the old economics. But if now they are provided with basically free intelligence that costs basically zero, that should allow them, and presumably they have some expertise, otherwise they wouldn't be in the room, to focus on that expertise even more, to get more value out of it. It's kind of going up the stack.
The reality of that, though, is that when we put DDC systems in, is that we couldn't keep up the maintenance to try and make all this broken stuff that had never worked for 50 years. When we connected it to DDC, it still didn't work. And we still had to go out there and we had to actually replace these devices. And if it's important that AI wants it to do that, then we actually have to go out and physically fix this. And we maybe can create robots to do it. We can do it more efficiently than we're doing it, but it's not going to go away.
Right.
Or ultimately we abandon the buildings. But even moving forward in the new thoughts, there's still a physical touch. Everything AI does has to touch reality. And we're the folks that make reality happen.
Yeah, Ken, when you really look at the total labor associated with system integration, you can kind of divide it into three chunks. You have the upfront project engineering, you have the application engineering once the controllers are installed, and you have the field engineering. Okay, and so the field engineering is what you just are alluding to, which is the touch. You've got to mount the devices, you have to calibrate them, you have to commission them, they have to work ultimately, and you have to know that they're properly installed. So AI, in my mind, is other than perhaps avoiding certain mistakes and ordering the wrong product, okay, having it show up on the job site. Oh, that isn't the device we should have had. But I don't see point of discussion here. I'm not convinced AI is going to do much for the field tech side of the coin, but I do think it can have significant impact on the upfront project engineering as well as on the software development. Okay. And
estimation too. Think about estimation,
on the
how much
sales
easier
engineering
that
side,
gets.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sales side, right. So that's real labor, and there's no doubt in my mind that hiring people who have the knowledge of how to do takeoffs, put a correct estimate together, um, do the project engineering because they have to understand what the customer is asking for, particularly if there's a guide spec or a specification that they're trying to follow. All that stuff is brain power that largely can be captured by AI knowledge, which means that a given talent individual can do more in the same hours.
Yep.
Right?
That was my
So,
point. Yeah.
yeah, which is to your point, Anto. So I do think that's where the gains are going to be made, which is significant. That's very important.
That applies to companies as well, right?
Right.
Which will be down to the company's strategy in terms of what products it builds in the future.
Yeah, which ones survive?
Right.
I actually thought of an example from history since we were talking about that. It's the asteroid that hit Earth that wiped out the dinosaurs and the mammals survived. It's kind of
Yeah.
a grim one, but there's also a positive spin to that too, I think.
So the smartest beings survive.
Yeah.
That doesn't hold well for the meat layer, does it?
Well, you can still be a mammal and have a heart to it.
Somebody's got to keep those data centers running. So, at least until they get robots going in there, which apparently isn't going to be that long from now.
So, Jim, are you excited or are you scared or where are you?
A little of both. I think that that the one thing that you said that sticks with me is the expertise. I think that the expertise is very important, and I think that companies that have that expertise will be the differentiator. But I don't want to say that AI isn't going to approach commoditizing the edges of that expertise, right?
It will.
It will.
It will try at least.
That's right. So I don't know. That's an effect I'm not sure of right now. Is how defensible the expertise is. Now, if Ken is correct and it's actually turning wrenches there's a lot of safety in that for a long time. If the expertise provides some barrier to entry or defense just because of the complexity that's out there, and the difference between theory and reality in the real world, I think that's a huge barrier to entry. Even if AI is very smart and all over everything, the nuances of the real world will take time to get modeled in a sophisticated way. So I think those are true. Just don't know how those things go together. And I do see a lot of disruption coming. But I see certainly benefits to how our industry runs, but I also see the zeroth order, which is that which affects our customers, as being very important. And I do solidly concur with Rick that office buildings are not the most important building type in the long run or ever never have been. But that said, the fundamental demand of why we need buildings could change materially.
Yeah.
Another, Anto and I were talking about governance before the session, and as the ability of AI to generate hype and misinformation is an incredible at an incredible rate is a big problem, and we need to come up with some method of a check and balance, and we need to, I think the technology, probably AI in itself can probably be one of the greatest proponents of governance. We need to verify stuff, and we need to understand when the recommendations, when it's hallucinating, and we have to be able to challenge it to keep things operating. And again, we're going to need a bit of that cardinal knowledge. And as we talked, I think it was last week, we talked about the AI agents actually employing human expertise to actually add reality to theirs, because they have all of this data, but they don't really have the backstory that why it all got to be there. So there's a lot of that complication that needs to get sorted out. And as we got these projections of it all working, we all know that it's not going to work. And there's going to be messes that are going to have to be cleared up. And it'll be done with a combination of AI and a combination of just common knowledge. Actually, some of the stuff that Anto was showing here is this cannot proceed at that rate of growth, because there's just reality hits. And there's a few reality hits, I think, that we've got to go through too. But setting up a check and balance system, I think, is going to be necessary. Jim, you come from a place, the BACnet 30 years of being in the industry. It is a check and balance system that is an internal part of that. And that basically, BACnet virtually saved the DTC industry by putting them all together and making them use a common protocol. And we need to, in AI, start working in that direction too. And I think Anto's going to tell us all about that in the future and guide us as he usually does.
Yeah,
Save us again.
Yeah, Ken and I were talking about governance in general, and I was sort of explaining that governance is really what has happened with BACnet, and to some extent what has happened with Lonmark, and to some extent what's going on with C4SB and Linux. It's when you have a standard, you can't just have a standard and write it down on a piece of paper and everybody go home. You have to govern it to make sure people are using it right, people are understanding it right, and all that kind of stuff. Right, and governance is the thing that would enable us to be precise and specific that we were talking about earlier. In this world of statistically derived answers from LLMs. So I think we're going to come back to that topic. And it's time to wrap.
Hey.
Does anybody feel like wrapping this? Kimon, I'm looking at you.
I
What have
think
we
I've said
learned today, briefly?
What have we learned? If we don't form a coalition and work together, we're all doomed.
You mean a coalition for dumber building or smarter buildings?
Something like
We
that.
have a
yeah.
coalition for smarter buildings.
Yeah.
That'll work.
Actually, we did we're having the trouble focusing on that river mirror for Vegas. And again, we had a great discussion, but didn't talk too much about what actually came together in Vegas. So we can keep pushing that topic.
I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I would say you could look at this year's AHR as the turning point, whether it's just coincidence in the timing or not, that may be, but there will never be, the industry will change so rapidly. For years, we've been on this call saying our industry moves so slowly. I don't think we have to worry about that over the next 10 years.
There's your wrap up.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kimon, Ken, and Tracy, and everyone.
Yeah,
have a
thank
great
you
week.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Bye.